What is it actually like to work as a Muslim at an investment bank, Big Four accounting firm, or other large company? Join me in today's video where I'm going to be sharing my own personal experiences of working as a Muslim at these kind of places and go through the questions that I was curious about before I started working. Welcome back to another video, and if you haven't already subscribed, then make sure you do, where I cover career tips and advice. And in today's video, I'm going to be covering my own personal experiences of what it's like to work as a Muslim at investment banks, Big Four accounting firms, as well as other large international companies, and talk about the questions that I wish could have been answered before I started working. Now, before I started working, I didn't know anyone in the industry, and so everything I knew or thought I knew about the industry was from TV shows or movies about what the finance world was like. However, as a Muslim, there were some things particular about my own religion and beliefs that I wanted to know about whilst working at these kind of places. As mentioned, I'm going to be sharing my own experiences, as well as the experiences that my friends faced at their own workplaces, as well as the experiences that interviewees from the TML website faced, so that you can get as much of a diverse set of experiences from different workplaces. So with that being said, let's get started with today's video. Now, as with every topic I'm going to be talking about in this video, it's important you understand you shouldn't expect other people to know everything about what being a Muslim entails. Whilst, yes, there's more diversity and inclusion trainings that are happening in the workplaces, these don't go into any specific religion in detail. So if you do need any accommodations or you want to make any requests, the onus will always be on you to voice your opinion and ask for them. The first thing I'm going to be talking about is praying. And in every building that I've been in, there's usually been a dedicated prayer room, or as it's generally known, a multi-faith room. These are essentially mini mosques where Muslims can pray and are surprisingly well equipped. Inside each building that I've been in, you're usually going to find prayer mats, prayer beads, scarves and abayas, Qurans, the direction on where to pray, as well as someone writing on a whiteboard every day of when the prayer times will be. And next to them, although this isn't always the case, you'll usually find a specific washroom where you can wash yourself before praying. And I'm sure everyone can understand how great that is compared to the alternative of having to take your socks off in the main washroom. One other thing when it comes to the prayer rooms is on Fridays, you'll usually have a separate prayer room away from the main one. And this will be double or triple the size. Usually an imam will come in and actually give a khutbah on that Friday, and there's a special Friday prayer occurring. This room will normally be segregated between males and females, whilst the main prayer room, which you use every day, might not necessarily be segregated. Now, I understand not every office building might have a dedicated prayer room, or you might also be watching this as an auditor or a consultant, or essentially someone who's always moving office to office depending on their latest client project. If you don't have a dedicated prayer room, then I suggest investing in something as simple as a mini pocket prayer mat, which can be fit in your backpack and you can carry around everywhere you go. By having one of these, you can easily find a clean place to pray. And what I normally did was just ask the client if I can occupy one of their empty meeting rooms to use to pray for just 10 to 15 minutes. From my experience at my workplaces, it's always been very easy to pray. And I always recommend two things when it comes to praying at work. Number one is just try and make it into your normal workday routine. This way, everyone's going to be aware of where you're disappearing to every couple of hours for several minutes. And secondly, by knowing that you're leaving your desk to pray, your colleagues will be happy to cover for you as they know you're going to be back in around 10 to 15 minutes. By making it clear to the rest of your team that praying is an important part of your religion, they'll be very understanding of having meetings and covering for you if you ever need any help. One thing Amir Taelbi always made sure when he was working was to make sure that there were no meetings scheduled on Friday afternoons so that he could always pray his Jummah prayers. Now, the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to praying is meeting people at the prayer room. Now, whilst I always encourage people to expand their network as much as possible with a diverse set of people, meeting fellow Muslims in the prayer room is a great way to help you at work. Not only will it be helpful to find out, for example, new halal places to eat, but also you can find employees that'll go through similar experiences as you, such as working during Ramadan. And that's a great segue onto the second point, which is working during Ramadan. A recent survey conducted on Muslims showed that the number one thing that Muslims want during Ramadan from their workplace is to have flexible working. It's important when you make requests at Ramadan is just because it's important to you doesn't mean that you can go in the day before it starts and place your request with your manager and expect your manager then to accept it. If you're requesting things such as days off, half days, or starting late, then your manager has to make accommodations for the team and train people up if needed. So my personal way of approaching Ramadan at work is to begin the conversation with my manager usually 3 weeks before it begins, where I talk about what I'd want. And in the week before Ramadan, I normally just follow up with my manager to make sure the things that we agreed on and talked about is still okay to do. What I found is work will be as much accommodating as you are in terms of the notice you give them. The more notice you give them, the more accommodations that they can make for you. Now, the main thing, as mentioned, that I usually ask for is to have more flexible working. And specifically, I always request that I start my workday at 10 a.m. Whilst everyone usually understands the basics of fasting at work, which is you don't eat or drink between the hours of sunrise and sunset, they don't necessarily understand not only the spiritual aspect of it, but importantly the physical aspect and the impact it has on your body. So when I'm explaining to my manager or my colleagues about what Ramadan will be and the impact it has on me, I normally do talk about the physical side of it as well. So things such as I wake up in the middle of the night to eat, and then it disrupts my sleep schedule, making me a little tired in the morning, hence the request for me to start working a little later, to things such as how my voice gets a little dry as the day progresses due to a lack of water, as well as the fact that the more days I fast, the less energy I'll actually have at work. Usually by explaining these physical aspects, I'll normally find that people are much more sympathetic to accommodating and helping me during the month of Ramadan. These days, there's actually a lot of events at work that explain to people what the month of Ramadan entails, both from a spiritual aspect, but also explains the physical aspect of it as well. You'll find companies such as EY and PwC having days where non-Muslims go through fasting as well. Whilst one of the interviewees on the TML website talked about her experience at Goldman Sachs, where she mentioned how one of the days was called the Fasting and the Curious, where employees of Goldman Sachs fasted for the day and donated their lunch money to a given charity. So with events like these increasing in number, as well as you explaining what Ramadan entails, both from a physical point of view and spiritual point of view, I found that more and more people understand more than just the basics of what fasting actually entails. Now, the last thing when it comes to fasting is your days off, and particularly around the last week where most people take days off, and especially around Eid. Now, as mentioned, you should try and sort these things out before they occur, preferably before the month even starts. There might be Muslims on the team or non-Muslims on the team that might also want to take these days off. The manager might be in a bit of a predicament when it comes to this, as you can't obviously have too many people off on the team on the same day. And so if there's a struggle between several people asking for the same days off, then my solution to that is...
Yeah, it sounds like a you problem. Let's go, Sox!
When it comes to food, there's usually enough websites out there and blogs that cater to all types of people when it comes to dietary requirements, and Halal Food is no different. I'm sure everyone knows several websites and blogs that they follow and look to see where the local halal foods are near their office. But when it comes to inside the building and the office canteen, I've found that there's usually a lot of halal options also available for Muslims. In all the places, the chicken is usually halal, and it's usually indicated that it is halal on the menu. So, for example, during my time at JP Morgan, I saw that next to every meal or dish, you'd usually have a allergy table which listed, for instance, there was V for vegan, G for gluten-free, and H for halal. Sometimes the food you'd usually see as halal every day wouldn't actually have the H on that day. So one thing which I'd normally do is I'd normally ask the staff canteen on if it was halal and someone just missed off labeling as H. Or perhaps sometimes there was a change in the way it was cooked and they usually add alcohol in to that dish. Whenever I started a new workplace, I'd usually just ask the staff canteen for clarification, even if there was signage on the food tables. That way, I know 100% what each symbol means, as well as if they'd actually understand what halal food means themselves. Societies at work, they're not necessarily similar to what you'd expect from university, but the premise is the same. They usually focus on a particular focus group. So for instance, you'd have societies that focus on the empowerment of black workers, and other societies will focus on working families, which arrange events for parents and their children. At the same time, you'd usually always have a society which focuses on Muslims. On the TML website, you'll actually find two great interviews of people who lead their Muslim societies at work. Iman Raza, who's co-chair of the EY Muslim Society, and Humaid Motala, who after visiting a PwC networking event in London, went back to his office in the north and started his own Muslim North chapter. What these societies usually do is try and make it as comfortable as possible for Muslims to practice their faith at the workplace. I'd love to hear more about other people's workplaces and what they do to accommodate Muslims, so make sure you put them in the comments below so I can have a read. My experiences of what the Muslim societies usually offer are on the male groups. They usually have a hadiths of the day. They normally organize Muslim events with other Muslim societies from other companies. As well as I experienced on Eid, they usually accommodate the entire canteen to offer a full halal menu. Now, as mentioned, everything I thought I knew about the industry before I joined was from movies and TV shows. And one thing which was common in all of them was drinking culture. It's a common occurrence, and I can't hide from the fact that this is something which happens quite regularly. Whether this is for promotions, leaving drinks, or just a get together after a long week, drinking culture is quite prevalent in the industry. Also, as a matter of courtesy, whether it's you hosting the party or you're just attending it, you are expected to buy a round of drinks for everyone as well. Now, if you don't want to be in an environment where it's solely about drinking, such as bars or pubs, then there are a range of other alternatives that you can do as well. I talk about this in my previous video on networking, where I talk about how the modern day networking events are changing to accommodate a diverse set of people. Whilst the majority of people will always look at work drinks as a way to celebrate or just relax after a long week, you have to understand that there is absolutely no obligation to go to these events if you don't feel comfortable. As mentioned, work normally accommodates a range of different activities that aren't always centered around drinking. Whilst drinking, as mentioned, is something that will always happen, modern day practices at work normally incorporate other events as well, such as quiz nights and bowling events, where everyone can also catch up with their colleagues. In our interview with Iman Raza, she mentioned how she was also surprised with the number of events which didn't revolve around drinking alcohol. She saw how socials were adjusted to accommodate people of different beliefs, and enjoyed the events that were put on, including her favourites, which were the events of virtual donut and milkshake making classes. London's Canary Wharf is itself an extremely diverse workplace with many Muslims working there. There's several events which occur around the area, especially during Ramadan, and you'll often see several buildings lit up in green to celebrate the month, including One Canada Square. 2020 also saw something quite unique, where in the month of Ramadan, the azan was performed and echoed around Canary Wharf. But the point I want to emphasize is when you do want to network with people, but you feel like you're missing out on several events due to them focusing on drinks, is to try and organize events yourself as well. So if you want to celebrate something yourself at work, but you don't want to talk about drinks, is to perhaps have a celebratory lunch session with people where you give them a range of options of which to choose from. And that's the main takeaway I want to emphasize when it comes to this point on drinking. People do want to build relationships outside of work, and drinking is normally the default option. If you do want to suggest an alternative yourself because you don't want it centered around drinking, then go ahead and suggest a range of different events, and you'll often find how excited people are to do something different. So those were the experiences of myself and my colleagues of working as a Muslim and things I wish I knew before I started working. You can see that being a Muslim at these kind of places is not a hindrance and definitely not a reason for you not to apply there. I'd love to hear everyone's experiences of what it's like for them to be working as a Muslim at their own workplace, so put them in the comment section below, and I'll see you all in the next video.